Hello friends, welcome to episode 99 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I am Sarah.
And I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob?
I'm full from dinner, I will say that. It was good. The weather outside is fantastic.
The weather outside's amazing today.
Yeah, Michigan has finally given us something other than winter and insanity.
But be warned, like, it is still March. Mother Nature giveth, Mother Nature taketh away.
Oh yeah. I mean, we have double digits. She's done the other direction before in the same week. So
yes, I have seen 70 degrees and snowfall in the same day.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So there's that. But for right this moment, the sun is shining. It is beautiful. The birds are chirping.
I ran a game just recently.
Yeah, you did. Your last game was your last weekend was your D&D game.
Yes. I think it went for the most part as I wanted it to, which is good. Like, I will not say that the plot progression and pacing felt good as it moved through. There were obviously things about it that didn't happen as cleanly as I'd like them to, and that gives me something to pause and work on a little bit. But other than that, it's moving through that portion of the adventure as I'd like. Good. Yeah, it was fun. It was enjoyable as I got into it, and it was nice to be able to write out that adventure and see already the progression of where it's going and seeing where you guys want to take it.
Yep.
So that was absolutely nice. It's nice having clean narrative stories every once in a while.
Yeah.
Versus like, I'm sitting in between. Where are my players going and why are they going there?
I was actually thinking about your game a little bit earlier today and how the orcs in your game are being a bunch of like just real jerks about a lot of things.
Oh, yeah.
And it's getting to the point where my character is going to have to put her foot down and speak things in their language.
Oh, excellent.
A little bit, and may need to be like, look, you all need to just stop being afraid of magic right now. Watch, I'm going to do a bunch of magic, and nothing bad is going to happen.
Sure.
You're
that could work out.
Watch it go.
that could work out, or it could not.
Yeah.
We'll see how that goes.
We will see.
Yes.
So we have a big show tonight.
We kind of do.
So one of the topics that is very near and dear to your heart is the whole idea of the narrative flow.
Yes.
And you yourself are extraordinarily like cinematic narrative style storyteller.
Yeah.
And even describing stuff as like with camera movements, almost as if you were reading a
I've done that a few
to us.
times, especially in 7C.
And so just the whole idea of like throwing out your typical adventuring day of just, which dungeon do you guys want to go in today? But like having a real good story written out, and how then do you move people through that story so that it is a compelling story with a start, a middle, and an end. And also on the episodic level, on the per session level.
That's the hard part.
Still also have narrative flow that is start, beginning, and end.
Yeah.
That are like chapters of a book.
Yeah.
And keeping that all together. It
is hard. The being narrative in your style is basically akin to novelizing. And unfortunately, a lot of writers, when they're writing adventures, end up novelizing and railroading.
Yep.
And that becomes a problem. You still have to give agency, and so you have to kind of wheel it back. So when I'm talking about narrative flow, really what it is you're focusing on the movement of events that lead from one thing to the next. That's pretty much it. That's the simplest part about talking about flow. And we're going to get into some of the details of what that really means on an but episode or session to session moment.
Sure.
What that can mean. So it's easy to break it down. One of the things that I thought was really neat was I found this quote from A.J. Humpage, which was, "Every story needs to be dynamic in this way. It needs to be smooth, seamless, and coherent." I love the word coherent in this. It makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
This is what we need to know as story flow, but it shouldn't be confused with pace, because pace is speed at which the story moves. Flow, on the other hand, is how the story moves along. It's all about movement and how to draw the reader in. This is something we're going to focus on. We're not talking about how fast you need to tell your story.
Right.
We're talking about the movement of it through. So when I get to a section in this, we're going to be talking a little bit about how episode to episode, or how many episodes or how many sessions this should take. Those are markers. They're not definitions. We're not saying your adventure should only ever be 4 sessions long. That is not the truth in the least.
Right.
We're kind of talking about the flow from moment to moment in those sessions. Things can take a lot longer. Your campaign could take months to get through 3 acts. With only a few turning points, because your players need to do other things. They have agency, and that's the point.
Yes.
But we still need to make it a good story. So moving into that, let's really make it easy to kind of frame this up. And I'm going to use movie pacing because it's something that pretty much most people know.
Yeah. I think everybody's pretty familiar with that.
So when you're talking about a movie pace, standard movies, pretty much prior to 2015, we all agree with this because things started changing then. Literally, writers started doing crazy things, and they did not follow the 3 acts. So Act 1 is your intro, which you're introducing the characters involved in it. You're setting the world up. You're showing what the setting is, and you're creating the first decision point. Okay, they are deciding to be part of this thing.
Right.
Whatever this thing is, they're deciding to be part of that. In Act 2, the subplot steps in. What is the underwriting thing that they're stepping into? Now, you can have a compassionate moment that then happens, whether it's love, whether it's compassion, whether it's connection themes, whatever.
Sure.
To kind of bond all the characters together.
Yes.
You then have your midpoint, which is literally the middle crest. It's where you're coming to the top of the hill and you've discovered the plot. You have the shift. The hero now either feels like a hero or is finding out that they're the victim. And you're now starting the downward slope toward the climax.
It's that moment where your hero sees how deep the rabbit hole goes and goes, okay, I've got to do something about this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then they make their plan. They execute said plan, and it falls right on their face. You then step into Act 3, which is the second failure, usually, or some kind of stumbling, which then leads them to their final success against whatever the odds are, be it a big bad guy or whatever.
Sure.
You can pretty much use this and look at any movie and cut it right up into this. Now, there are other little segments and turning points in there, and they get defined differently, and that's really where some people, if you're into writing and you know of Joseph Campbell, you're going to know about monomyth and the 17 turning points. And this is literally just a way to take any story, any myth, any legend, any book, anything, and literally define all the turning points that could possibly exist and where they fit. And whether they fit in the beginning, the middle, the end, or how they all go in there. And we're talking about everything from what we use, which is the call to adventure, as the opening kind of gambit, all the way right out to your end. All the little steps that can happen in there. But they still follow the standard 1, 2, and 3 kind of act, but really they're not acts in this. We're talking about major turning points.
Right. A lot of these are like just kind of variations on the same sort of thing. There's a number of ways to get your heroes involved in there. Like you said, there's the call to adventure. There is just getting involved in things. The belly of the whale is what it's written down here.
Correct.
So there's a lot of ways of immersing your main characters into the plot that will then draw them in.
Correct.
So it's never just sometimes it is, but often is not just as simple as, hey, you guys want to go on an adventure?
Yep.
There's a villain that needs to be fought, Yep. But it can be that simple.
It definitely can be. And, excuse me. One of the things that Knox just brought out is, how does a narrative flow if your story is a great race? Cannonball Run. There were 3 movies of that. They weren't great, but they 100% met all of these things. You met all the characters at the beginning.
Yep.
They all bought into the race. They found out that the race was more than just the race that they had a challenge for. The midpoint is you see the heroes of said race, the people you've actually been following all along, not the supporting characters doing their things. There is always love and compassion in those stories. They always try and do something crafty and it fails. And then the ending is always the hard race to it.
Yep.
I mean, it doesn't matter what the setting is. The setting in that case is the race.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The characters are sometimes the vehicles and the people at the same time.
Sure. Nobody slew dragons, but the race itself was the adventure.
You know, and in some cases you have a literal race at the end of stories. You know, I can think of a few movies back in the 80s that did that. Whether it be a downhill snow race or a race in a yacht against the, you know, rich people.
How many movies are there in the Fast and the Furious franchise right now?
Lord have mercy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Hidalgo, I think, was the other one that came in mind. That was the desert race.
Yeah, I know of it, never saw it. Yeah.
Again, same type of story. There was still a beginning, middle, and an end to that story, but it was a race through the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
So yeah, it really doesn't matter what the setting is so much as the movement as you move from piece to piece. So this begs us into the harder part of this, and this is where things are going to start slowing down so we can get into it, is what does this mean for your game?
Right.
Like, okay, great, you're telling me about all this narrative stuff, but that is not... my characters in my story are not things under my control. Your adventurers, your players are going to do things that are not within your power. You know, you're going to present them things, and that's going to get, you know, great, but how do you know what session? Like, how quickly should I move through things? You know, is Act 1 2 sessions long? Is Act 3 5 sessions long? You know, how do I find that? This is where different people venture a little differently, and I want to kind of walk you guys through the changes here and what I mean by this. Acts are not a thing. They are not real. Don't try and say that an act is one session or even a definable thing other than a concept.
Yeah.
That holds a bunch of turning points.
Yes.
So if you've got an idea that your characters need to get to know each other for a whole session, great. Do that. So start out your story, not even necessarily your session 0, but your actual first session with them getting to know each other somewhere. Maybe they do that pretty quick. Maybe they've already written their background, so now you're like, well, great, what am I going to do in that first story if they already kind of know each other? Talk about your setting. Get them to know the world that they're in. Give them a simple adventure that walks them through. Just a couple things.
Great place for a milk run.
Exactly. Yeah. Milk runs are a great way to point out your whole setting and walk through it in a couple things. Again, we're not talking that this is multiple sessions, or it could be 2 sessions even.
Sure.
Again, we're talking about it as a portion of your adventure. Okay? If you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty of it, I mean, Guy Slanders, who does How to Be a Great GM, wonderful thing. There's a couple good videos that I could totally recommend. Literally paces it down to a 1-2-1 or a 1-2-2 methodology. And that is, you have 1 episode for your opening, your Act 1, if you will. You have 2 episodes or sessions for your middle, and you have 1 for your climax. That's it. Simple as that. Or if things are going well, you have 1 for your opening, 2 for your middle, and 2 for your finish. Because maybe your heroes get caught up in something before they have their final climax. Maybe they get caught by the bad guy and have to break out or something.
Yeah, sure.
Or the bad guy gets away to get to his lair or something. So you always have stepping points that are in there that can do that. Are those sessions concurrent? Becomes up to you as the storyteller. Maybe your players do their first session and do their intro and stuff and get committed to the story, but they don't necessarily bite the opening plot and run toward that mid. That's fine. Let them run a little bit, and then when you hook them back, now you know your next session is going to be for this portion of the plot, this part of this adventure. You then have your second part of your mid at some point, maybe right after it even if you want to, and then are they preparing themselves for the finish? Sure. So maybe you need to throw in a few before the final turn to the climax. That's perfectly okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Some people's sessions are 3 hours, some of them are 5, some of them are longer. Your mileage may vary based upon your own table, or even if you're playing at a convention. But when we're talking about adventures, we're talking about just moving through those turning points, not even calling them like hard acts. Sure. Knowing those turning points. And that's really where the Campbell 17 can be a boon for you. Because although you have that beginning, middle, and finish, you may not know what to do in those areas, what turning points you need. You need a call to adventure. Your adventurers need to be brought together. But what else do you do to kind of keep things turning and interesting if your players are kind of, in your own mind, dragging their feet? Did they accept the call? Did they refuse that call? Mm-hmm. Maybe that's part of the turn. That could be part of the things. Do they need someone else to step in to bring it up? Supernatural aid is an easy turning point. Harry Potter did it perfectly.
Oh, I was thinking Star Wars.
Again, you think about it.
Star Wars actually, like the first Star Wars, A New Hope.
Yep.
Episode 4.
Let's go there. Yeah.
is actually a great workshop in the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
You've got Luke, and he's kind of got broad dreams for getting out there and going to
great introduction.
Going to Toshi Station, I think it was he wanted to go to.
Yeah.
But.
He didn't want.
But he's a moisture farmer, and so he goes out. He meets Ben Kenobi, and learns a little bit about what's actually out there. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, yeah, but still, I don't know if I want to. And then comes home and finds his home destroyed.
That's his turn to the middle.
Yes. That is when he gets that call to adventure. He refuses the call at first, and then it gets taken away. That choice gets taken away from him.
He crosses that first threshold
and receives supernatural aid. Then in the form of Ben Kenobi, who says, "It's okay, everything's going to be fine. Come with me. We're going to find a pilot. We're going to go make this right."
Yep. And then there's the trials that follow right after that.
Yep.
You've got all of the things, and it fits very comfortably. And I highly recommend, if you are uncomfortable with writing stories or seeing the turns in plots and stuff, give yourself the chance to go and look at Monomyth. Just search it up, Monomyth, and look at the 17 points and how they break out. And grab a movie you really like, an adventure movie or the like with a hero in it, and just start looking for these pieces, and you will see them fall into place. Mm-hmm. And it will help you understand that when your players are doing something, you can include these little elements at their times, whether it's the beginning, the middle, or the end, and your players will recognize them subconsciously and will buy into these bites. Yep. And that's really what pushes the narrative. Because, they could go fight a bunch of goblins in a dungeon. That doesn't help anything within your story necessarily. But including that perhaps as an atonement at the middle for one of the players, like, who had to take care of the goblin problem back home, and he gets to the end and he realizes these are the same tribe of goblins that killed his family. Mm-hmm. And sitting in there is the doll from his sister on their pile of riches.
So now he's got motivation.
He atoned for that.
Maybe while he's in there, while you guys are in there fighting the goblins, something else is going on to the town back home. And you're going to return to a smoking pile of rubble, or at least maybe some wounded people who are saying a much bigger problem showed up while you're away.
Yeah.
They hit you where you live, so now you've got to respond to that, you know.
Likewise, as you get closer to the finish, maybe your players are dillying a little bit or doing other things, and somebody makes them, it's time for you to go home night. You're done with this section. We'll take care of it from here. Mm-hmm. And your player's like, no, I got to see this through. No. We're sending you back on guard duty. You're fine. You've done as much as you can do. We're going to make you a sergeant. You don't have to go on patrols nearly as much. And so you send them back. So they're watching from the sidelines. Mm-hmm. But then someone comes to need them. So now you've got that hook back. Yep. Now they have to go rescue the people who foolishly sent them back to their desk, for that desk job, kind of a thing. And they have to get there in a hurry. So now you have a unique travel moment.
Yeah.
So you can push all these things. And as I'm saying these, they should be highlighting things from adventures that you already are aware of. Whether it's, suddenly you're like, well, how are we going to get there from here? We won't need a plane. Portal opens. Suddenly now they're moving right through that kind of a thing. And this is where your players feel these adventure hooks, these turns, if you will, so that they naturally feel like the progression as the story moves through. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The very basis of a story, if you really want to get down to a fully dressed out story, beginning to end. You're talking about a new life, a call to adventure. It makes it personally. There's the big screw or the final test, and then the climax at the end. Yep. You get those 5 things down within your story, and your players will love it.
Yes.
Every single time.
Yes, absolutely.
You throw in some other flavors on top of that from any of the other pieces as it drags along, your players will feel like this is more epic than you could ever imagine.
Yep.
As long as they can see it, and feel it within the story, you're making the narrative flow.
And that's the thing too. I think that's the important thing to drive home is that there's a lot of ways of going about and doing these things, and I think there's a I think stories like Song of Ice and Fire, you know, Game of Thrones and such like that has really kind of in to an extent Tolkien as well. Has really kind of lit a fire under a lot of people to like feel like they need to overcomplicate things, to have 15 different factions all warring against each other and plots within wheels within wheels, and so many moving plots. But that gets so confusing, honestly.
It very much can be.
And you can 100% deliver the best game in the world just by following this simple outline of narrative flow. Hook your players, put them into the story. Give them the conflict and hook them into that. Give them time in the middle to engage with the plot. You twist the plot. Hand them a failure so that their actions have consequences, and that the antagonist, I will say, not even big bad evil guy, because you don't need a big bad evil guy, just that the antagonist has power, because if they defeat him easily, that's not a story,
right?
So you need those failures in there. You need them to run their head up against a little of a wall a little bit, and then move to the climax where they finally reassess and defeat the antagonist, and come out victorious on the other side. If you can just move through those simple 3 acts, but make all of your NPCs lifelike, make all of your descriptions lively, give them some background music, give them, some really good NPC interactions and stuff like that, and make each one of those 3 steps the most rich, flavorful storytelling experience. You don't need anything else. You don't need subplots, you don't need red herrings, you don't need any of that other flavor. Just make it the best 3 acts.
And when we say that this design is for your story, we're not even saying that this has to be for a campaign. You can do all of this in a single adventure. You want to take this and basically distill it down to walking through something simple. If I'm going to go take my players through a dungeon, literally start to finish on a dungeon, that's it. That's the whole adventure is one dungeon. The story is very simple. The conflict is that there is a clerical order that has been that needs to retrieve an artifact from one of their crypts, and the crypt has been defiled in some way. They're not sure what's going on down there, but this local person can't do anything about it, and so he's hiring some adventurers to help him out.
Sure.
We just want you to go into it.
Go clean the crypt.
Very simple. We'll go clean the crypt. So your first step into that, set the setting. Get the players to know each other and set the setting. So your characters are all known adventurers, either from Renowned or from Recommendation or from something else, and they've all been brought together to this guy to work together to get this finished. They're all going to split the money evenly and or be compensated equally in some way.
Sure, there's your call to adventure.
Exactly. Now you have to define where you're at. Well, it's a crypt. It's run by these clerics. It's a very, very old crypt, but it's usually exceptionally quiet because it is so old, and it's just this young group of acolytes who are basically cleaners. That's for nothing better, and they do their traditions on it, and that's it. So they're not priests by any means whatsoever. The old priest left some time ago, and they haven't gotten their new one yet, and so they're a little weary about sending things up, but they've heard things down in the crypt. Strange sounds and movements, doors closing and opening that have never opened before, and they think that some of the crypts have been disturbed because there's a green ichor that has been flowing along the channels in the tile. So now you've set up a mystery. There's some sounds, there's some things, and there's a green ichor. Now we're interested, right? So now we start stepping into the end of the first act and into the second, because your players are interested, they're already hooked, they're going to go take care of this, because these clerics need their assistance before anyone notices in town, because it could cause a problem.
Sure.
And obviously we don't want the town, or maybe the orphanage there, getting sacked by whatever could possibly be in this crypt.
So now we've got our turning point. We're entering the belly of the whale, we're crossing the first threshold, and this is our movement into Act 2 as we engage with this crypt.
Correct. So now they get into this crypt, and they're starting to look around, and they're finding not only the stuff from the clerics, but maybe they find a child's shoe. Uh-oh. So there's something else going on down here. Maybe there's children down here as well. Uh-oh. So we have a turn. We have something that's making it personal.
Right.
Now we have concerns down here. We can't just kill everything, and just walk our way through this dungeon, because or crypt, and make our way to the end of it, because there might be something else going on here.
So you were presented a thing in Act 1. You find out that thing is slightly different in Act 2, and it causes you to step back and reassess.
But they're too invested to just walk out the door and go ask the cleric why he's hiding children in the crypt.
Right.
But maybe they got hid down here. So now they have to get into this situation, and they make it to their first major challenge. Maybe it's a wraith, or some kind of a relatively simple thing that's there, holding a child hostage. Maybe the child is unconscious, and it's laid across one of the ritual stones, looking like it's going to be some kind of a summoning, act, and you've got these spirits around it, and a whole situation about to happen. So now you've got this challenge with this child that they have to save. And so they take care of the situation, kill off all, dispel all of the wraiths, and finish it up, and gather up the child, only to find out that the child is crying as he wakes up, saying, "Where's Marco? Oh no, there's another child."
Why is it always Marco?
It's always Marco.
It's always Marco.
So they don't necessarily fail. They fail forward. They didn't finish off what they need. So now they get a little bit more truth. They find out what's really happening, that the children went down there and disturbed something, which probably set off a chain reaction of events. Now the spirits are awake, and something's missing. Oh no. So one of the children has it. So is he still down there? Well, of course, no one's come out. We know that from the clerics. This place has been sealed off, and they've been defending it. So none of the children have made it out. Who else is down here? So now this child you have to carry with you into the third act. So now we have the chance to, if the players are really enjoying the story and are like, oh gosh, what's going to happen next? You could open it up a little bit and give them an extra moment of finding the other child, maybe not there. Maybe not the way that child came in. Marco has now been turned. Or maybe Marco was the green ichor problem. And actually it was, the whole thing was that the crypt was trying to defend itself from this new thing that was there, defiling it. So Marco was the defiler, but now we're left with the problem of the crypt being awake and awakened. So you have to put the crypt back to sleep. So for your final climactic moment with the crypt getting put back to sleep in some way, and the key in them being able to return back to the cleric with the child and saying that everything has been taken care of. You've had a whole story, whole adventure.
Yep.
All written out in that format. And that's the idea behind this, is that I'm giving turning points. I'm not even saying when the story should start or end. I'm just giving you the turn points. So that could very easily be a 4 or 5 session long adventure. Now, does that whole thing fit into another section of your campaign as its own turning point? Is that setting the setting for your players?
Sure.
Or is that their call to adventure?
It may very well be.
And that's what you have to start moving forward with, is getting yourself into the mind frame of, what section am I in? And that's where campaigns can come into flavor, is what part of this grander adventure, and am I keeping things in a pace that makes sense to migrate people through it? And that's what we're talking about when we talk about with narrative flow.
I really liked this other bit that you found from Scott Ream, the Angry GM.
Yes.
Where he actually says, it's not about acts.
No.
It's about the transitions. He says he says, you write 3 parts. The resolution, which is the confrontation of the major climax. The motivation, which is what induces the heroes to accept the quest. And the adventure itself, which is all the crap that makes up the actual adventure portion. No acts needed.
Correct.
Now, those are still kind of 3 acts, but again, it's not about how long those take.
Correct.
It's about where those transition points are. Maybe your adventure is super quick. Maybe it's not. Maybe the adventure goes on for a while. My own personal game, this adventure's gone on for several sessions where you guys are fighting these bandits and such like that, because you keep finding out the rabbit hole goes a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. So the whole adventure itself section has been like 10 games now,
Right, and it's a matter of making sure that every time you're turning in there, you're not turning the same turn. You're not hitting the same turn point. You're adding to that adventure. You're giving another flavor, another exposition within there.
Yep,
that's
exactly. The key. And keeping things a little bit fresh. Handing them twists and turns that are sometimes surprising, sometimes beneficial, sometimes detrimental, but sometimes life-threatening,
But they fit into the narrative flow.
Yeah.
You never want to go and take a step back. I'm never going to recall them to adventure until I'm done with the story.
Yeah, they're hooked already.
Yeah.
They're hooked already.
That's already happened.
It's about just handing them little twists to keep the adventure fresh and keep them on their toes without yanking the rug out from under them. And excuse me, I'm just distracted by this GIF that
I know.
that Knox in the Box put in the live chat of a woman wearing a transitional dress.
I love the idea of that transitional clothing.
Yes, one of those stage sort of transitions where like she takes off the belt and the dress unfolds, and suddenly it's something completely different. Yes, Knox, exactly like that.
Exactly. Now, you have your standard things of, can your players break this?
Sure.
And the answer is yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And no. The whole point is that you ultimately tell them what's next. You give them what's next. You can slow things. You can speed things up. You can change any part at any time. They don't know. Only you know the failures of what you're writing. And it's never a failure. There's always just something that can be next. So maybe your players feel that the whole scene that you just had, the whole fight that you just had was meaningless because you ended it and they defeated the guy and they're like, okay, so what was in his bags? Well, just some gold and scrolls and stuff. And they're like, oh, well, crap. That kind of sucked. And so they're all like, yeah, I don't understand what the point of this adventure was. So like, okay, great. Keep it to yourself. The next opening is the turn. Present them that when they walk out of the crypt, something else is there. Someone finds the useless thing that they got exceptionally important and presents them with X. And now they have something new. Look for the narrative turn that can make it better.
Or maybe the twist was that he didn't have anything on him, and there's a significant reason for that that'll be revealed at this turn.
Opening. Yeah, you don't always have to make your reveals at the end of your session. They can happen at the beginning. And I've found out, and I make this mistake all the time, that sometimes it is best to end the combat if it's coming to the end of your session and just call it right there and say, okay, next adventure we'll be picking up right here at the end of this, so that everyone starts with a fresh mind at the beginning of the next adventure, and you can then do your exposition in turn.
Yeah.
And I try and squeeze it in at the end, and that always feels bad every time I do it, but it's something that I fall into all the time because people are tired by the end of that. They've done all the math. Yeah. They're squeezing up at the end. Everybody's looking at their clocks, and they're all like, you have to remember that is in itself its own point to pause your flow and wait till the next episode.
Yep.
To give it to him again. So
the twist will happen.
The twist will happen.
It'll happen. Don't be impatient about it.
Yeah. So if you're struggling with your turn points, maybe you've got an adventure you're working on or something where you're like, okay, this is what's going on in my story. message us, put it in chat with us. Let us talk about your story a little bit and try and fit it into the 3-act design or the turning point design by Campbell, and see if you can fit your turning points in there. See if you can write out in a line or two your call to adventure and the motivations of your players and what's supposed to be going on in the next phase. And you can paint out the picture of your story. You will feel better looking at it that way, knowing that you have the confidence to say, I know my beginning, middle, and end. I just need to get my players to each one of these turns. And then each time you can say, I can make this turn instead of this turn, and make that adjustment. And I would love to see it. I would love to see that this is that we are assisting our groups in making better stories.
Absolutely.
That's what we want out of this. So we do have questions.
We have some questions.
We have good questions.
We're running really good on time. So
we are. So, Overwatch asked, have you ever had a game where the narrative flow really jived with your players versus ones where it didn't? What was the key difference between the situations?
I think the narrative flow I've got going on right now in my game, I think is really good. I feel like I've hit a point where I know myself and I know my players well enough that I can write sessions that accurately reflect the amount of time that we have allotted for our game, and go through a logical progression, have a start, a middle, and an end. So I feel like for me at least, every game has been better than the last. And that's a really nice place to be. Versus ones where it really did not. I think for me, like, preparation has always been key. You know, going in with a goal. I know some storytellers really excel at, like, flying by the seat of their pants. I see Reddit threads all the time where they're like, guys, I didn't do any session prep for my last game and it was my best session ever. And, like, okay, cool. I'm glad. Don't get me wrong. I'm always glad to hear that a DM had a good session. Like, by all means, I'm glad people are having fun at the table. But I don't feel like that's the big takeaway is don't do any prep. I feel like the times where I have taken the time to account for where the players might go, what contingencies I need to have in place. I've got NPC names, I've got descriptions of locations and such like that ready to go, so that I never had to trip over anything. I never had to go, okay, it's,
Right.
You know, I always had an answer. Were my best games.
Yeah, and I from a player's perspective, I will say this before I get into some of mine. The best stories are ones where you remember them. I don't remember you ever saying or stumbling on a name or something like that. That's not something I focus on. I focus on the turn moments of walking in and seeing an astrolabe in the middle of a crypt and going, ooh, I wonder what that does.
Yeah.
How do we turn that thing on?
Yeah, right.
You know, and then when we turn it on, what the hell did it just do? You know, those kinds of things.
Did we just kill our Khajiit?
Yeah. Hearing from my players when that you guys found the undercity of the underbelly of the gnome city to be really cool. Like the fact that the whole gnome city actually had a 100% working steam engine underneath it, effectively pumping and running water and doing stuff within the city, and you guys and that the goblins were running it for them. Like, oh, that was such a great idea, because you only get so far with the stories of, oh, dude, I totally rolled a nat 20, and then I critted on this thing, and I critted on that thing.
Yeah.
Those fight combats things happen on occasion, but you're not going to tell that story to a lot of people.
Right.
What you are going to talk about are scenarios, moments that built out of your story that involved the players, and that's where the narrative comes out.
Like one of my players, who's probably listening right now, one of the biggest takeaways he had from a recent game was not fighting a dragon. In fact, specifically, it was not fighting a dragon. It was telling the dragon he hated him.
Yeah.
And that he was going to come back and kill him someday.
Yep.
And lived to tell the tale. Like, the dragon was just like, okay, dude, yeah. Whatever.
Yeah.
but that's become like a huge driving goal for him, and that was a scene that he really like took home with him. Like he looked a dragon in the eye and told him exactly what he thought of him.
Yep.
And now there's that's the thing. It's never the combat.
Yeah. I loved defending a certain someone from a hail of arrows because he was being an idiot about showing force. Like, we don't need to do this. Dude, you're going to get... You know what? Just stay on the ground. Stay on the ground. I'm not even healing you. Stay on the ground.
From underneath the dog pile of warriors, you hear, haven't any of you heard of a warning shot?
The answer is no.
But those are the moments you remember. The funny in-character moments. The moments that are character defining or... turned a story in a certain way where, you might have made a role, or you might not have even made a role, where you said something to someone and the DM went, okay, yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah.
But
it was always a turn of some kind.
Yeah.
And those are the parts you remember. Those are the little moments of narrative that kick into your head and engage them. The one that really got me was the one that I wrote where you guys in 7th Sea left the keep by cart, got ambushed, and it was all a vision.
Yep.
Of what was going to happen, because at that point I had locked in with that player what their power was and how strong it was.
Yep.
When it mattered, when it really mattered, and let all the other players realize how powerful it was as well. And it really made the difference for that part of the story. It called everyone to that point of adventure and let you guys roll into it. And I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say the key differences between your sessions that worked and your sessions that didn't?
Defining what was important, what was the motivations. Literally, just as you're describing here, like, what is the key motivation for my players? Mm-hmm. What is the key adventure point in it, and what was defined as the call, what brought them to it, so that I knew how it was going to be resolved, what their motivations were going in, and what little bit of adventure elements that I wanted in that.
Yeah.
I literally, that whole thing I had written with just, I think I had 3 paragraphs written for that whole adventure, that whole section of that adventure, because I knew what I wanted to make sure was important.
Sure.
And it was just the one villain. She needed to know how dangerous that guy was. Mm-hmm. And so after that, it was just wading into that danger and making sure that the rest of the players understood why they were listening.
Yep.
What was important about them listening and feeling her motivation behind it.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah.
It really worked.
I think it's great to set up a situation like Sean and I were actually talking, and he brought up the idea of building situations, not plots.
Correct.
And so coming in with just like you said, 3 paragraphs written down.
That's it.
You've got a situation, and then you just hand that to your characters, and you let them move through it.
Yeah.
You let them explore it and react to it and move through it, and then you see where they end up on the other side of that. And take it from there.
And simplifying your NPCs are something we've talked about in other shows, and I highly recommend we go back to it, and we definitely will talk about breathing life in NPCs more than this. But all you need then is to have each of your NPCs know their motivation and what they're doing at that moment in time about it. That's it. Your big bad guy or your protagonist or antagonist who's in it doesn't need to have this giant, vision with ridiculous things.
Doesn't have to be an end of the world plot.
No, he literally could just be a turd to the king because they were friends a long time ago and he wronged him by stealing his girlfriend. There's his motivation. He just hates him for that reason. He's the king and this other guy is not. He has his girlfriend, he doesn't have it, and he's angry about it.
I have a crown and you don't. So
exactly.
You will listen to every edict I have to say.
Exactly. And all he wants to do is kick that crown off his head once. He doesn't even want the crown. He just wants to kick it off his head and look at that girl and say, "This is what you missed."
For me, the big example between scaling of antagonists has been the Pokemon games.
Oh yeah,
I've been playing Pokemon with my buddy Corey on Tuesday nights over Discord. It's been great fun. We started off with Pokemon Red, the very first edition, and their Team Rocket, the bad guys, are basically just trying to collect Pokemon and become vaguely powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
that's it.
They don't really have a huge, like, I mean, they're kind of bad guys. They break into some places. They steal some things.
Sure.
They terrorize some locals here and there by, like, taking over some things. But ultimately, though, like, if left to their own devices, they'd be as bad as, like, an evil corporation, you know, like...
At best.
We kind of hate those guys. They've got unscrupulous business practices, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas, like, you get into, like, later games, and they're like, I am attempting to summon a Pokemon from the dark depths of an alternate dimension so that I can use him to destroy the concept of hope.
Wow. Edgelord much?
First off, calm down.
Yeah.
Second off, why?
Yeah. Terry, I've known you for a few years. It's a bit much for you.
You know, but I'm just saying, is like, you don't... You know, look back to the first Pokemon game where it's like, wow, these guys are kind of unethical and jerks.
Yeah.
They're the bad guys. Like, and that was more than enough of a driving force. Like, when Team Rocket showed up, you're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to kick their butts.
Yeah.
You know, and I realized it was meant for children, but, like, even, like, I'm 41 years old, and I just had a blast playing that game, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's the greatest plot in the world, but what I am saying is it was an engaging plot. And keeping that sense of scale, and as long as you deliver the plot in a concise and engaging way, you know, you don't need all the bells and whistles. You can just have unethical business dudes with angry Pokemon.
Yeah. Again, it's all about the call, getting into it and seeing where it goes.
Yeah.
All right, we got another question here.
Yeah, so Knox in the Box is asking, how do we feel about scripted storytelling beats and monologues? Are they an awkwardly forced insertion from an otherwise quote-unquote improved game that should be used sparingly? Or do you feel like they act like a proper cutscene tool needed to pull the players out of the sandbox shenanigans and back into the business of a more serious story?
So I'm going to say, if you're talking about the difference between sandbox shenanigans and a more serious story, you're doing it wrong. I think you've got to disconnect then. If your players are sandbox shenaniganing, that's where your story is. Mm-hmm. Just turn it. Just lean into it. That's it. It's hard to note the difference, and it's sometimes really hard because your brain is so set on this is where I want the story to go, and you see a vision of what that's supposed to be, and you have to literally break that apart and say, what are the components of that vision?
Yeah.
And then the last thing you have to keep in mind is this is a group storytelling time. If your players literally want to go off and raise ducks, and they're really having a good time with them ducks, lean into the ducks. Make it an adventure to get better ducks, you know, or the ducks get caught, you know, by something. And just take your plot and shift it. Yeah. Make it go in that direction. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
Dungeons and ducks.
Exactly. It's totally a thing. Now ducks are going to be a thing. Jeez, you know, how many animals do I bring into this darn place?
I mean, I've always felt scripted storytelling beats and monologues are... I like them. But I absolutely understand where the root of your question is, and I understand where the difficulties in using them comes in. So first off, I like not so much scripted storytelling beats because I feel like that takes the agency away from your players a bit, but I don't mind monologues so much.
No,
because sometimes especially your villain, your antagonist, or really, I mean, just about anyone, but typically it's your antagonist, needs to get some plot exposition out.
Yep.
And monologuing is actually a great way to do that, because they can not only gloat, which makes them seem, you know, braggadocious, and allows them to kind of twist the knife on the tension between them and the protagonists.
Yes.
But also, it allows you as a storyteller to get some really good plot exposition out. Mm-hmm. And so, it may seem cheesy, and I would say you got to be careful about how you execute it. Mm-hmm. Because you tend to run into, like, the Bond villain thing of, you know, ha 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 ha, now that you are captured, I will reveal all of my plan to you. Well, you don't want to do that necessarily.
Yeah.
But a little bit of, Aha, you're already too late to stop me from doing this thing. Soon true power will be mine. Oh, okay, so he was collecting all of the MacGuffins so he could get true power. That's a tidbit of information that we needed, or whatever. Or, I've already delivered the MacGuffin to my master. Oh, he has a master.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can drop little things in there like that with monologues. Now, the problem I usually run into with monologues is the villain steps up and says, ha ha ha, you have finally made it into... And the rogue goes, I shoot an arrow at him while he's talking. Because we've all seen The Incredibles, and we all know you punch them when they monologue.
Yep, their mouth is open. That's a target.
And I hate The Incredibles for giving us that. Because I really want to be able to monologue.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, and I think if you set that expectation early with your players, that's what you'd really like to do, sometimes you'll get away with it. And you do.
Yeah.
The other thing is I found this to be effortlessly. I can't say it. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Is that you weight the size and scope of the monologue to the awe that your villain inspires prior to them opening their mouth.
Mm-hmm.
There is a reason why Thanos can literally sit on his duff with no armor on and stare at the heroes as they are 12 feet away from him and have a full conversation. Because they don't know what's next.
Mm-hmm.
And they're terrified at the thought of it. Because he's already instilled that fear.
Yeah.
He vaporized half of everything.
Matt Colville actually had a really great discussion on one of his YouTube videos about how to introduce a villain like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically like the example he used was in his campaign. He had a bunch of people kind of sitting around the tavern doing the whole, okay, we're going to go on our first adventure scene. And they don't even know who this villain is, right? I've never met him. He's not, to their knowledge, involved in anything that they're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Walks in and basically just smites somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And like even the town guard was like, we can't do anything about this guy.
Right.
And he basically monologued for a little bit. It was very clear from how the story played out that like these little level 1 adventurers were not going to do anything to him,
Mm-hmm.
And then he just walked off.
Mm-hmm.
But they knew his name.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew, like, he didn't know theirs.
Mm-mm.
He didn't care.
Mm-mm.
They're below his notice.
Yeah. He was talking to somebody else.
Even if they did talk a little crap to him, he would probably just looked at him and was like, you're cute.
Mm-hmm.
And walked off,
Mm-hmm.
It's all about establishing the difference in power level.
Yep.
And making it so that your players don't feel like they can just take a pot shot and solve the problem.
Likewise, having your characters have a level of respect.
That's the other way of doing it, yes.
Is the opposite, where you've got like a bunch of bandits who walk into an inn and they're being all rowdy while your heroes are in the corner silently watching them from a glaring angle of like, who the hell are these hooligans?
Uh-huh.
And like the innkeeper's kind of shying down and like looking at you guys, and then finally they turn and they go, hey, who are you? What are you doing in our seats? And they come over like all big thugs or whatever. It's the whole concept of like pulling a gun on Superman.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you going to do about it? Nothing. That's a right. Goes to, shoot him in the chest and literally the round just disintegrates against him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, were you saying something? And at that point, it's the turn. It's that moment that your players feel great. And that's where sometimes scripted scenes like that to improve the morale or to show off where they're at is a wonderful thing. It doesn't mean that it cannot be part of plot, and it can definitely expose things. You could literally have these random thugs have something random on them, or obviously working for somebody bigger.
Sure.
Kind of a thing. And that's where I'm thinking that even if you're doing a improv style game, always keep a line about where you're going. What's the point of this improv?
Yeah.
Improv is great, and you can definitely improv and roll through most situations, but there's no reason why you can't always keep a sticky note of, I am in Act 1 or whatever, and I've moved through these phases, and I am on this section, and these are my options for the hooks. What am I doing to lean into one of those on this event?
And what can I throw into the improv to get them to yes and into my plot? That's the big thing.
That is what we're talking about with narrative flow. You can literally have nothing written and just keep generating things as long as you remember what you've done. And you've got those as your narrative notes, you can improv 100% from beginning to end.
Yep.
There's nothing that says you can't do that. And your players will feel amazed that you had this all planned out, and it felt like an adventure.
Yeah.
And that's the neat part about writing in a narrative way, is that it will always feel like an adventure as long as you hit those points, those hooks, those changes. That's where it gets interesting. What do we got from Knox here?
He says, I don't know, there's a video where this guy tries to shoot Superman and the bullets just bounce off, so he throws his gun at Superman and then Superman ducks out of the way. I think he gets punched twice in the arm for flinching.
Probably. I think that's a really good way of doing it.
Yeah.
The other one that always gets me is when your hero is getting shot at by a million bullets and they're all being deflected off of him, and then he doesn't realize that those bullets are going other places. Like, oops. So,
I was pretty happy, actually, about my last game. I got to monologue a little bit with my villain.
You did. I think that went well. Actually, you've gotten it twice now. The dragon was a monologue.
Well, okay, so the dragon wasn't so much of a monologue.
The dragon was a scene monologue.
The dragon priest was a monologue.
The dragon scene was a monologue.
Yeah.
The whole scene, the whole moment was a scripted moment that you presented to us. But it was done beautifully. It was weighted properly. There was a weight of why it was there. It presented a narrative moment, and then you hooked in part of the story. You let the player kind of present to you what was going on, and you were like, aha, okay. Let's go ahead and have you kill that dragon priest, because he's a pointless guy. He let you in here, you can go have his job. And that right there was narratively scripted and beautifully executed. There was no feel like we were all concerned. There was a tension in the room. The weight was already been laid down.
Yep.
We knew what we were getting into. And that's where I thought that was beautiful. Likewise, with Titus, you did a great job of the build up to that point, where literally we knew this was the head of the necromancers. We were scared about what we were stepping into and how dangerous that situation was going to be.
And how many of you pooped just a little bit when two Minotaur skeletons stepped out?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
And that was where I was so happy. I got to monologue.
Yeah.
Because he was like, oh yes, Minotaurum cyrodilis.
Yep.
Or, the common cyrodiilic Minotaur. Not so easy to find around here, these parts. They were hunted nearly to extinction in the late Second Era.
Yeah.
But finding the bones of them,
not so bad.
Terribly common.
Yep. No, I felt that was a wonderful way of doing it, and doing the Monty, what's behind door number 2, kind of moment. So.
Yep.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah, you can monologue, but you just, like I said, you got to be careful about it, and do it with impunity too. Overwatch mentions holograms, illusions, astral projections, PA systems.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to monologue from the safety of another room.
Yeah, there's also nothing that says that your bad guy can't take a hit.
Yep.
I mean, everybody has the same rules, so look, he could literally just grab a dude and pull him in front of him. Oh, that guy's dead. That was rude. I liked that guy. Now I have to pay his wife's pension. So, enjoy the topic from this week. Our next week's topic is our 100th episode.
100th episode, guys. We're in triple digits now.
So we're going to be talking about what it's been like to live a year in a box and what we learned from tabletop RPGing in the digital world.
Yep. All right.
So
you can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, on Instagram at @ST_Conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave, and join us on our Discord. You can find that link up on storytellerconclave.com, our website, as well as on our Twitter feed. We usually tweet it out once a week.
Thank you very much to our Patreon members, especially our named members, Knox the Box, Sam, Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion, Vedran, and Hulavu. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. You can find that at patreon.com/arcaneanthems. Our Our intro music is Beyond the Warrior by Guy Frog. You can find that at guyfrogmusic.weebly.com. Our outro music, which you're hearing right now, is Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find that at soundcloud.com/midairmachine/tracks.
And a big shout out, as always, to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for loving and supporting us.
Thank you.
All of our friends who've sat with us at our tables over the years who give us these great stories to share with you. And you, every single one of our listeners, we love you so much.
Love you all.
Stay safe. Good night.